Have you ever wondered how the life of one of the Bible's greatest heroes came to an end? Joseph of Egypt, the young man betrayed by his brothers who rose to become the ruler of a nation, had a death few know about, and a fate afterward that will leave you amazed. In this video, we'll uncover how Joseph died and what happened to his body, sharing lessons that still echo today. If you love stories that blend faith, mystery, and inspiration, subscribe to the channel now and leave a comment below. We want to hear what you think of this incredible journey. Joseph of Egypt wasn't just another name in the Bible. He was a giant. The son of Jacob, sold into slavery by his own brothers, he faced betrayal, imprisonment, and famine to become the second most powerful man in Egypt. He saved nations with his wisdom. But what happened when this extraordinary life came to a close? Joseph's death and the fate of his body are more than an epilogue. They're a mystery the Bible invites us to unravel. Genesis gives us clues, but also leaves questions. How did he die? Was it a peaceful farewell, or one filled with meaning? And afterward, what did they do with him? Today, we'll dive into this fascinating story, step by step, to understand not just Joseph's end, but what he left behind. Stay with me, because this journey isn't only about the past, it carries powerful lessons for our present. Imagine a man who, despite facing the worst, chose to forgive and trust in God until his final breath. What can we learn from someone like that? Joseph wasn't perfect, but his life was a testament to resilience and faith. And when we talk about his death, we're not just closing a chapter, we're opening a window to something greater. So, if you want to know how such a remarkable leader ended his days and why it still matters, let's embark on this journey together. And so, we reach the point where Joseph of Egypt's life, full of twists and turns, begins to draw to a close. The Bible doesn't give us a dramatic or tragedy-filled account of his death, and that already says a lot. In Genesis 50:22-23, we read that Joseph lived to be 110 years old. For his time, this was an exceptionally long life, a sign of blessing and favor. He didn't just survive the trials of his youth, he thrived, governing Egypt alongside Pharaoh and saving countless people from famine. And more, he lived long enough to see his great-grandchildren born, the sons of Ephraim and Manasseh, his two tribes. Picture it, a man who started as a slave, now surrounded by a family that would carry his legacy. But what makes Joseph's death special isn't just his age or prosperity. It's what he did in his final moments. Genesis 50:24-25 takes us to the heart of this chapter. Joseph, now elderly, gathers his brothers, the same ones who sold him decades earlier, and delivers a speech that radiates faith and vision. He says, "I am about to die, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And then comes the request that defines everything. "When God leads you out of here, take my bones with you." These words aren't just a goodbye, they're a testament. Joseph wasn't thinking only of the present, of the Egypt that had embraced him. He was looking to the future, to Canaan, the promised land he never called home, but knew was his people's destiny. After that, Genesis 50:26 is straightforward. Joseph died at the age of 110. There's no mention of illness, suffering, or a sudden death. He simply rested. For a man who weathered so many storms, this tranquility is almost poetic. The Bible doesn't say he was sick or in pain, only that his life came to an end, like a flame that goes out after illuminating everything around it. And that makes us reflect. Was Joseph's death a reflection of the life he led? A life marked by forgiveness, for he reconciled with his brothers, by wisdom, for he governed with justice, and by trust in God, for he never doubted the promises, even when all seemed lost. Think about it for a moment. Joseph could have died bitter, carrying the weight of his brother's betrayal or the loneliness of living so far from home. But he chose a different path. Years earlier, in Genesis 45, he had told his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God turned it into good." That mindset stayed with him until the end. His death wasn't an isolated event. It was the closing of a life that defied the odds. And his request about his bones? It wasn't vanity. It was faith. Joseph believed God would fulfill the promise made to Abraham, even if he wouldn't live to see it. He wanted his body, even after death, to be part of that greater story. So, how was Joseph's death? It was serene, intentional, and full of purpose. He died in peace, surrounded by family, with the certainty that his people would one day return home. There's no record of mourning or chaos, just the sense of a mission fulfilled. But the story doesn't end there. What happened to Joseph's body after his death is as fascinating as what he did in life. Because, while he rested, his bones were about to embark on a journey that would span centuries. Joseph died in peace, but his story was far from over. What happened to his body afterward is a stunning continuation of the legacy he left behind. Let's start with what the Bible tells us in Genesis 50:26. They embalmed Joseph and placed him in a coffin in Egypt. This detail is intriguing, because embalming wasn't a Hebrew custom. It was an Egyptian practice, reserved for important figures like pharaohs and nobles. Joseph, though a foreigner, had become indispensable to Egypt. He saved the nation from famine, earned Pharaoh's respect, and lived as a revered leader. So, embalming him made sense. It was an honor, a recognition of his impact. But why does this matter? Because this process preserved his body for something greater, something he himself foresaw in his final words. Embalming in Egyptian culture involved removing organs, treating the body with resins, and wrapping it in linens. We don't know the exact details of how they did it with Joseph, but the result was the same. His body remained intact, stored in a coffin, likely in a safe place in Egypt. And there it stayed, for centuries. This brings us to a question. What happened next? Joseph had asked for his bones to be taken to Canaan when God delivered his people. Let's fast forward to the book of Exodus, chapter 13, verse 19. Here's one of the most remarkable scenes in this story. As Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, fleeing slavery and Pharaoh's army, the Bible says, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. For Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear an oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and then you must carry my bones with you from this place. Think about that for a moment. In the midst of chaos, the people fleeing, the Red Sea ahead, the Egyptians behind, someone was carrying Joseph's bones. It wasn't just any burden. It was a symbol. Joseph had prophesied that God would deliver them. And now, centuries later, it was happening. Carrying those bones was like carrying Joseph's faith, a testament that God's promises never fail. But the journey of Joseph's bones didn't end in Exodus. They traveled through the desert with the Israelites for 40 years. Imagine, while the people faced hunger, thirst, and battles, Joseph's remains were there, a constant reminder of the man who trusted God even in the worst circumstances. Finally, we arrive at Joshua 24:32. After the Israelites conquered Canaan, the promised land, the Bible records, the bones of Joseph, which the sons of Israel had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in a plot of land that Jacob had bought. This plot in Shechem wasn't random. It was an inheritance from Jacob, Joseph's father, a place deeply rooted in their family's history. This burial was more than a funeral. It was the closing of a cycle. Joseph, who was torn from Canaan as a slave, returned home as a symbol of triumph. His bones, carried across generations, found rest in the land God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And what does this mean? That Joseph's faith wasn't in vain. He died believing in a promise that would only be fulfilled long after, and his bones bore witness to its fulfillment. It's a story that transcends time, connecting Egypt to the desert to Canaan, and Joseph's life to ours. So, what happened to Joseph's body? It was embalmed, preserved, carried on an epic journey, and finally buried with honor. But more than that, it became a link between the past and the future of God's people. The journey of Joseph's bones to Shechem brings us to a crucial point. His story isn't just about death or burial, it's about what he left behind. What can we learn from a man who, even in death, kept pointing to hope? First, Joseph teaches us about faith that sees beyond the present. He died in Egypt, but believed in a promise that would only come true centuries later. How often do we give up because we don't see immediate results? Joseph challenges us to trust, even when the road is long. Second, his forgiveness of his brothers shows that bitterness doesn't have to define our end. He chose peace, and that shaped his legacy. Think about the carrying of his bones during the Exodus. That wasn't just a detail. It was a symbol of continuity. Joseph staked everything on God's promise, and his remains inspired a people on the run. And you? What legacy are you building? We don't need to rule nations like Joseph, but we can live with purpose, forgive as he forgave, and believe that our actions ripple beyond our lifetime. His serene death and burial in Canaan prove that a life well lived has the power to echo across generations. So, what does Joseph's story mean for us today? It calls us to look to the future with hope, heal the wounds of the past, and build something that lasts. Joseph didn't see Canaan in life, but his bones made it there. How about we start planting seeds for a legacy like that? The story of Joseph of Egypt shows us that death doesn't erase a legacy. It can amplify it. From his 110 years of life to the journey of his bones to Canaan, Joseph proved that faith, forgiveness, and purpose transcend time. He died in peace, was honored in Egypt, and was buried in the Promised Land, fulfilling a vision that began generations before. I hope this journey has inspired you to reflect on your own life. What will you leave behind? If this video touched you, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. What does Joseph's story mean to you? Your engagement helps us grow and bring more content like this. Until next time, may we all live with the same courage Joseph carried to the end.